Howdy folks, Jamboree here, welcome to Puppet Panic. In this episode I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man 2, a film that many consider to be one of the best superhero films ever made. But is this all just comic book fan hype? Or does it really deserve to be put on such a pedestal? Let's find out. It's been 2 years since the first film. Peter Parker is having trouble making an income, plus his Aunt May's house is facing foreclosure. Mary Jane has found a new man, and his best friend Harry is now CEO of Oscorp. As research for his new college essay, Peter meets up with his science idol Dr. Otto Octavius, who is making a fusion reactor with the power of the sun, using mechanical neural controlled tentacles as gloves. Unfortunately, this experiment goes completely wrong, and Otto becomes devoted to his new villain persona, Dr. Octopus. This is a superhero film that I couldn't help identifying with and relating to, because Peter Parker is now living as an adult in a cruddy apartment while trying to keep a steady job, as well as commit to his studies and follow his duties as Spider-Man. That's what I love about Sam Raimi's take on this character. He really understands the appeal of a working class superhero, as well as the human drama that comes with such a protagonist. While most superheroes have government funding or their very own corporation, Peter is fending for himself and surviving on his own efforts. Yes, his best friend is a rich, wealthy man, but Peter is humble enough to not depend on that privilege. However, it's Peter's dilemma over juggling his role as Spider-Man with his personal life that serves as the film's central narrative focus. Peter can't commit to a life of his own because he has a secret alter ego that kicks into action whenever crime is nearby. Peter's uncertainty over whether he can be Spider-Man when his heart is with Mary Jane, a career path to science, and ambitions to be a photographer, and this rubs off on his hero work because suddenly he can't use his powers. It's as if his gift is more than just a radioactive accident. It also ties into his conscious decision to embrace the power of a spider. When Peter consults a doctor about this new bodily change without giving away his secret, their answer proposes a question that Peter never asked himself.
Maybe you're not supposed to be Spider-Man climbing those walls. That's why you keep falling. You always have a choice, Peter.
I have a choice.
So, after much thinking and consideration, Peter makes the conscious choice to leave his superhero mantle behind and lead a normal life. This also means that Peter has to say goodbye to his uncle all over again, because Ben is a part of Spider-Man's identity. And I love how the film addresses this, because it shows how the Spider-Man mythos is rooted in Peter's grief. One of the major strengths of this film is how it brings existential philosophy into an action film, deconstructing the sense of free will and agency that a superhero can have, by giving them a chance to bow out, while also finding out the consequences to such a decision. Yes, he now has the freedom to attend classes on time, see Mary Jane's play as the curtains open, and live a normal existence as a regular guy. But there's sadly a cost to this freedom. Not only is he too late to be with Mary Jane because she's moved on, but the city's crime is also increasing dramatically. People are losing hope without a Spider-Man, and Peter now has to face the guilt of turning down chances to save people. Audiences are forced to think about Peter's conundrum as we ask ourselves what we would do in his situation. Would we fully commit to a superhero lifestyle at the risk of maybe leading emptier lives? Or would we live an average existence while being frequently reminded that we have the power to save lives? Peter's paradox is dramatically challenged when he sees an apartment building on fire. While he has become used to turning down rescue missions, the hero inside him can't ignore a chance to do the right thing, as he tries to save a little girl from the burning flames. However, he performs this good deed without the aid of his powers. And when he learns that some poor soul didn't make it, he realizes that he could have saved even more citizens as Spider-Man. Now, while Peter is facing existential problems, Aunt May is up against the threat of foreclosure on her home. Even though May is coming close to losing her home, she's still trying to be a rock, while also dealing with the grief over surviving without her husband. She may be an old lady, but she's stronger than Peter thinks, and heck, his strength derives from her maternal role in his life. Aunt May is perhaps the most unsung character in this film. Her story of dealing with financial woes and how she eventually just decides to move house tells the tale of a woman who refuses to let the world beat her down. The younger characters in this film are facing their own losses, but they handle such failures or defeats with villainy, self-destruction, or denial. Aunt May is a trooper who shows that being old doesn't make you weak in heart or soul. In the end, May becomes a hero to Peter by saying exactly what he needs to hear right now.
Courageous, self-sacrificing people, setting examples for all of us. Everybody loves a hero. People line up for them, cheer them, scream their names, and years later they'll tell how they stood in the rain for hours just to get a glimpse of the one who taught him to hold on a second longer. I believe there's a hero in all of us.
May's words, "there's a hero inside of all of us," really rings true throughout the whole movie too, which strengthens the film's message to the audience. When Peter tries to rescue the little girl from the burning building, he almost falls to his death at one point, and the child is the one who saves him. There's also a scene where Aunt May is in the clutches of Doc Ock, but she has the guts to strike him at the risk of her own life. When Spider-Man credits her help in fighting the villain, she says this:
We sure showed him.
What do you mean, we?
Oh.
Because Peter's humble nature comes from her. In the finale, Mary Jane has an opportunity to attack Doc Ock from behind. Yes, she fails, but it's the fact that she gathered the courage and believed in herself that matters. Being a hero isn't all about winning or being strong, but whether you have the bravery to do the right thing, even if it means you end up losing. Heck, even Peter's neighbour Ursula demonstrates heroism in the simplest of ways. She overcomes her shyness to give Peter a glass of milk and a slice of cake at a troubled time for him. No, she didn't punch a bad guy or save a citizen in distress, but she showed love to a man who feels conflicted inside. And that is just as heroic as being a cake crusader to me. Spider-Man is a superhero because he's a fighter for justice who's harnessed his radioactive powers. Anyone on this planet can be a regular hero though, even you, the person watching this video. So like I've said before, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films aren't just about the story of Peter Parker. They also cross into the lives around him and the characters he meets. Take Dr. Otto Octavius. This is a man who Peter idolizes and maybe sees as a paternal figure, and who can blame him? Not only is Otto a visionary scientist who has committed his life to a source of renewable energy, he's also incredibly charming, has a clever sense of humor, and wants to inspire this student to become great.
You need to sleep soundly tonight, Otto.
Did Edison sleep before he turned on the light? Did Marconi sleep before he turned on the radio? Did Beethoven sleep before he wrote the Fifth?
Did Bernoulli sleep before he found the curves of quickest descent?
Oh, Rosie, I love this boy.
Heck, this is the kind of man Peter could become one day if he improves his time management. Seeing Otto's passion for this project is beyond inspiring, but it's also what makes the tragedy of its failure so heartbreaking. The downfall of his fusion reactor not only crushes his dreams, but also kills his lovingly supportive wife, and disappoints the already emotionally haunted Harry Osborn, who funded Otto's project. Which brings me on to Doc Ock's role as the villain. What I love about Otto's antagonist stage is how much range there is in his portrayal. He can look cool and badass, intimidating and scary, but also pathetic, sad, undignified, or scared. It's this range that makes him such a richly complex character. The tendrils attached to Otto are the driving force of his corruption. These alien-esque mechanical claws are characters in their own right. Sinister machines that are seducing Otto into a life of crime. The tendrils aren't just a powerful statement about artificial intelligence's potential to overthrow humans. They're also an allegory for Otto's internal feelings after the accident. Both his grief over the passing of his wife that's causing a depression, and the obsession over his passion project. Not to mention, these tendrils also help the Doctor become more threatening as an antagonist, by enhancing his stature to imposing height, or serving as an extension to his physical strength in fights. While a lot of the darkness consuming him can be blamed on these evil robots, there's still a hint of Otto in this villain persona, from his distinct sense of humour to his charismatic confidence.
Hand her over!
Of course!
Easy now!
Butterfingers.
That's what makes him such a fascinating antagonist. He's a broken soul that's being taken advantage of by the very machine he created. But there's still hope for him to come back and be himself. Luckily, in the film's climax, the tendrils are soaked in the sea's water, making them too weak to control Otto. And it's up to Peter to remind the scientist who he is.
You once spoke to me about intelligence. That it was a gift to be used for the good of mankind. A privilege. These things have turned you into something you're not. Don't listen to them.
This inspires Otto to not only overpower his tendrils, but also destroy his fusion reactor to save the city. It's this act of heroism that ties into the film's very message of finding yourself, owning your identity, and being willing to make sacrifices for others.
It was my dream.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most. Even our dreams.
So what about Mary Jane, the love of Peter Parker's life? Mary Jane is now a professional theatre actress, currently in a staged adaptation of The Importance of Being Earnest. It's quite uplifting seeing Mary Jane's dream career finally taking off. But what I like the most about this play is how Sam Raimi intercuts each theatrical performance with the film story. Like when Peter doesn't turn up to a showing after promising he would, Mary Jane's character reflects her own conflicting feelings. It's a really clever way of combining the stage with cinema for effective storytelling. I do feel for Mary Jane's frustrations, because she clearly still has feelings for Peter, but he's darting back and forth about how he feels. We know it's because he is divided about his love for her and his fear of putting her in danger if he confesses who he is. But from her perspective, it really must be stressful and confusing. Many have criticised Mary Jane's fiancé Tim for being too bland, but it's important to realise that he's not meant to be a deep character or a complex rival for Peter's affections. Sure, I get the need and desire to want to learn more about Mary Jane's current love interest, but Tim is simply a man that she's decided to settle with. Someone to fill that void that Peter has created after distancing himself from her. MJ is in love with Peter's compassion and Spider-Man's heroics, so of course she's going to go for a friendly astronaut. That's the closest she'll find to both. However, when she tries giving the famous upside-down kiss to Tim, she's suddenly hit with the realization that Tim isn't going to make her as alive and happy. In the climax, MJ discovers that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are one and the same, which does help her understand Peter much more. But he fears she'll be unsafe if he dates her. You can tell how much this rejection hurts Mary Jane's heart after finally making sense of everything. However, MJ actually runs away from her wedding and confronts Peter, not only confessing her feelings as loudly as she can, but also criticising him for not letting her choose if she can handle being Spider-Man's girlfriend. It's a bold protest that shows how Mary Jane has gained a sense of self-freedom since the last film. At the same time, the film's last shot also foreshadows how nervous MJ is deep down, her face alone conveying her feelings. Then we have Harry Osborn, who now heads his father's company Oscorp. You can tell that leading his dad's legacy brings him great joy, because it's his chance to live up to the father who neglected him. But you can also see how all this power and money is going to his head. Couple this privilege with bottled up insecurities, the failure of a project he funded, and a revenge for Spider-Man under the assumption that he killed his dad, then you have a man who has the potential to go down a dark path of violence and anarchy, just like his father, creating the theme of a generational curse. He obsesses over Spider-Man so much that he ends up forgetting everything else, including his loyalty to his best friend Peter, something that blows up at a party.
You stole MJ from me. You stole my father's love. And you let him die because he didn't turn in the freak? Isn't that right? Huh? Isn't that right?
When Doc Ock needs an item from Harry for his project, a deal is made. Harry promises the scientist what he wants if he can bring him Spider-Man alive. After a tussle on a train, Doc Ock manages to kidnap Spidey and bring him to Harry, only for Harry to be shocked to realise that the man he wants vengeance upon is none other than his best friend Peter. I really buy Harry's confusion and fear here, mainly thanks to James Franco's authentic reaction. Once Harry lets Peter go though, he's haunted by his father, who taunts him for not killing Peter. This vision of Norman is an eye into Harry's psyche, deep down into the trauma and neglect that his powerful dad brought upon him.
You're weak. You were always weak. You'll always be weak until you take control. Now you know the truth about Peter. Be strong, Harry.
Harry reacts in anger, only to break the mirror and reveal Norman's secret history as the villain Green Goblin. Now, Harry's journey down a dark path comes full circle as we foreshadow the next generation of Osborn crime. A Green Goblin who is riddled with self-hate, fear of failure, and a bloodlust towards the city's only superhero. Right, this is a very character-driven movie, as you can tell, but it's also full of action. What I love about the conflicts between Spidey and Doc Ock is how they somehow both outmatch each other, yet are also equally matched. They both use their animal-inspired gifts as extensions of their fighting styles, which can make them clash, but Otto's tendrils are strong enough to possibly crush Peter's skull, and Spider-Man's web gives him a huge advantage. Sure, I can tell when characters are CGI doubles, it's noticeable, but the visual effects animators do their best to keep the fight's energy going. Of course, the train sequence is the highlight of the film's action set pieces, a tightly executed and adrenaline-pumping rescue mission that's full of suspense. The intense speed of the train, broken controls, and railways drop all make this one nail-biting scene. I also like how Peter is handling this conflict just after returning as Spider-Man, because it's like this train represents the pressure he holds as New York superhero, and he has to prove that he can take on this burden all over again. Once Peter saves the day, the passengers safely carry him to a resting place. His identity is revealed, but everyone promises to not exploit his secret. Now, many have criticised this scene for being too unrealistic, because they believe that most passengers would take pictures right away. But I think that's a very cynical take on a well-meaning scene. 1. These passengers have just gone through a collective trauma together, so of course they're going to feel a sense of unified gratitude towards their hero. 2. These citizens have already experienced a city without Spider-Man, so exposing him will just jack up the crime rates all over again. And who wants that? Besides criminals, of course. 3. If reflecting realism means normalizing disrespecting celebrities' privacy, then I'd rather have the scene stay as it is. Yeah, society is full of jerks. I'm not saying that they don't exist or that we shouldn't call them out. However, all I'm saying is that what's the point of nihilistically condemning this scene as unrealistic when it can set a new standard for public behavior? By showing these people not taking pictures, the scene is demonstrating how things can be different. Because in all honesty, the train passengers are a fantastic way of solidifying the film's message that anyone can be a hero. Heroism is about risk-taking courage and love and compassion, which is exactly what these citizens demonstrate.
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
Right, so you may be wondering why Spider-Man 2 has ended up on a show called Puppet Panic, because it's not the first film you think of when someone says a puppet movie. But here's the fun fact. Dr. Octopus's tendrils are a mix of CGI effects, animatronics, and hand puppetry. Yes, Doc Ock's tentacles are actually puppets in a lot of shots. You do need a keen eye to notice when the tendrils are computer animated and when they're practical effects, but that just shows how effective the puppetry is. Edge Effects put a lot of hard work into the research, designs, and planning for these tendril puppets. The puppeteers didn't simply wobble these tendrils around frantically, they gave these mechanical creatures their own distinct personalities. Though robotic, they have AI intelligence that's sneaky, seductive, and snake-like. What's extra impressive is how actor Alfred Molina worked in sync with the puppeteers. Without Molina's precisely timed actions and his close connection with the tentacle operators, we won't be able to believe the on-screen relationship between man and machine.
Something in my head. Something talking. The inhibitor chip. Gone.
To conclude, Spider-Man 2 can be best described as a human drama that happens to have superhero action scenes. It's an emotionally rich and deeply complex take on comic book mythology, one that psychologically and philosophically explores a superhero's freedom of choice, while also celebrating the heroes we can all possibly become ourselves, and how not having superpowers shouldn't stop you from doing good for others, changing problematic norms, or showing a fierce condemnation towards evil. So those are my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. What are yours? Let me know in the comment section below. I've been Jamboriki and I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, then feel free to like, subscribe and share. Also, please consider supporting me on my Patreon in return for awesome rewards. Thank you. So, what am I going to be reviewing in the next episode of Puppet Panic? Well, seeing as that Christmas is coming up, I say we start making things a little Grinchy. Cheerio, folks.